Well, we've got a great crowd, so let's go ahead and kick off as people come in. Welcome, everybody, to the first installment of the Recognized Leadership webinar series brought to you by Awardco. So my name's Dave Christensen. I lead product marketing here at Awardco. Very excited to have you here. We look forward to doing more of these. We want to bring folks across all HR disciplines together, recognize you for your efforts, your leadership. Most importantly, talk about tactical day-to-day things, learn from the experts, learn from each other on how we can be better in our roles and how we can set ourselves and our teams up for success. So this is going to be an evolving series, and look forward to having more. What we'll do today, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Nathan Tanner. So Nathan joins us with a great background, and it's a very interesting week for Nathan, as we'll let him speak to this. Just did his book release. Nathan, is this your second book?
This is the second book. Yep.
Second book. Just had his second book release earlier this week. He's taking time out of a very busy launch week to be with us. So Nathan is an executive coach and author, among many other things, who started his career in finance, has been an advisor for Y Combinator, helped build kind of the people ops and HR function at DoorDash during their hyperscale days. I'm sure there's some interesting stories there, and has worked with a number of other startups, and then is now currently doing executive coaching across all industries, authoring books. Nathan, we're really excited to have you here. I hope I did some justice as to what you do in your background, but anything I missed that you want to let the audience know about yourself?
No, you did a great intro. Yeah, thank you so much. This week is the book launch. I'll go ahead and just put this in the chat if people do want to take a second to check it out. But yeah, busy week, but no place I would rather be than hanging out with a bunch of HR and people folks. It's a fun group.
So what I will say is correlated with that book launch, Nathan does have 3 codes that allow for free Audible to his book. We will be randomly selecting 3 of you here towards the end of the webinar, so stick around. We won't necessarily announce that on the webinar live, but we will email you for those that we see stick around here till the end. So we will be here, at least 30 to 45 minutes. Maybe we end up taking the full hour. We'll just kind of go with it. Again, thanks for joining. For those who may not be aware of us, we are Awardco, an employee rewards and recognition platform. Our goal is to help HR teams and others really power that employee journey for a more engaged team, better that employee experience, and reward and recognize employees. And of course, if you'd like to get to know more about us, we would certainly love to talk, and we will be in touch there. But that's not why we're here today. We're here today to talk with Nathan. The subject of today obviously is around leadership. And I love the title of the book, The Unconquerable Leader, Mastering the External and the Internal Game. So we're going to be talking about this unconquerable leadership, but how it applies more specifically to us in HR and people ops, how we can think about managing up, asking good questions, and really what is HR's role as we train our orgs, especially when it comes to leadership training. So with that said, we'll be conversational, but I'm going to hand it over to Nathan and we'll dive right into the content today.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Let's do it. Do we want to start with that the question around things
we
that
do.
People may
thanks
disagree
for reminding
with?
me. So yes, so I like to. I was so worried about how the question that I forgot about. So I like to start with a little segment. Press the guest. So we're going to start with something that kind of gets the juices flowing a little bit. It's not going to be softball. We want to dive right into the tough stuff. Nathan, you've been coaching teams, you've built teams, you've been around HR, people ops teams for a long time. What is the number one thing you're seeing teams get wrong at the moment?
Yeah, I may lose friends on this. So if everyone kind of leaves the conversation because of this, I apologize, Dave. I apologize to Awardco. But one of the things I've seen, especially over the last few years, is there's a ton of energy around disrupting HR and like, how do we flip HR on its head? How do we come up with the new coolest perk or opportunity? And quite frankly, I think that is a waste of time for the majority of companies, because there's so much needed, especially at growing companies, to get the fundamentals right. So I say, like, don't try to disrupt HR. Let's try to operationalize it. Let's set aside the trick plays and let's really get the blocking and tackling right. Like, does the HR system work and have accurate data? Does the are we compensating our employees appropriately? Are we running performance reviews effectively? Are we kind of rooting out bad behavior at the company and building a healthy culture? That's where the energy should be. And I think it's easy to kind of get distracted by disrupting HR or kind of these new bells and whistles, because, like, quite frankly, getting all of that stuff right is really, really challenging. It's really difficult, especially if you're a 1 or 2 person team. I've been there before where it's just me in the HR role and you're wearing all of these different hats. And so anyway, that's my take of, like, too much energy on disrupting HR. Let's operationalize it. Like, let's get all of the little things right so the company can run smoothly.
I got it. Yeah, I love that. Quick follow-up on that, Nathan. Do you think coming out of this cycle that we've been in, especially in startup, Silicon Valley, tech world, where we've kind of come out of this hype cycle, are you seeing teams start to focus on the fundamentals more? What are you seeing right now out of teams?
Yeah, it's funny. That take I just shared actually came from an article that I wrote a couple of years ago, where that was much more of a thing. I think over the last few years, there has been a big shift. And some of that is, interest rates have gone up, just the macroeconomic environment has changed. And so I think employers now are spending less energy throwing different things at employees to either try to attract them or retain them. And now you can spend more energy on getting those things right. So yeah, I do think we've kind of gotten a little bit out of that environment of all of the bells and whistles and crazy perks and things like that. And quite frankly, I think that is a good thing, and probably in some ways makes the lives of HR easier. So.
Amen. Well, appreciate that.
Okay, well, let's dive in then. The first topic that I want to talk about is the role of HR in leadership training. Like, what is the role that we play? And in my experience, this comes down to 2 different types of training. And these are what I call functional training and manager training. And I'll put this up there. So functional training is when you are new to a role, what are the responsibilities that you have? What do you need to get done? And I think this is the role that the manager needs to play, or the department needs to play. There should be functional specific training. HR, I think, can play the role of setting those expectations. But ultimately, like, that is in their court. What is in the what's in the court of HR is manager development. Like, we as HR leaders need to own that management training. And so as I think about that, like, this is actually this is an old slide. I'll go ahead and share. This was created back when I was at DoorDash, and when every new manager joined the company, this was shared with them, and we would sit them down for a couple of hours and share all of the responsibilities that managers had. Weekly one-on-ones, reinforcing values, even approving time cards, all of these different things. That became very, very important to creating that. And so, topics that I think that manager trainings can include are effective one-on-ones, giving clear, direct feedback, managing underperformance, behavior terminations. Everything you see here in this list, I think, are really, really good topics that HR can own. And so HR, own the people management training, set a consistent standard across the company. What I also think is not the role of HR is outsourcing training fully to a third party. And that's something that I think could happen. I'm not saying that you can't bring in a facilitator. I actually do that quite a bit in my role. It's just kind of like, let's just completely outsource and kind of throw the ball over the fence and let someone else do it. And the reason why I think it's important is a lot of these topics here that we're looking at, this is very, very specific to a company's culture. And so I think it's important for the role of HR is like, okay, what makes sense for us in our culture? How do we give feedback? How do we manage underperformance? Do we do PIPs, performance improvement plans? Do we not? Do we have OKRs or do we not? And so I think if you completely outsource HR training or manager training to someone else, you can lose a little bit of this. And then I think the second piece that I would add is what HR should not do is assume that managers will figure it out. This is very common at a startup. And maybe it comes from the Steve Jobs quote of like, we hire smart people and then get out of their way. Managers do need training. There's a lot of value that can come from that. And anyway, I think it's very important for the role of HR to take that on. So anyway, that's all I had for this topic, Dave. But yeah, anything you want to throw out there before we jump to the next one?
Yeah, I would love to follow up. So for those of us from larger organizations, it can be intimidating to think about those topics, to what type of cadence we should do, what's the content we should provide. So let me ask you the first question. What recommendations might you have for companies kind of at scale as to, do you bring everybody together in a room and train them? Is some of that training happening one-on-one? What is some of the tactical day-to-day advice you might have as to administering that training?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you still hear me okay?
Yes.
You can. Okay, good. Yeah, my headphones went out for a second. Yeah, so when I first did this at DoorDash, there had been zero manager training done. There were 250 employees, probably about 40, 50 managers. Nothing had been done before. And so going from zero to something was a big ask. And so I started a monthly workshop that was just required. All managers are required and expected to come to this. And we just hit a different topic every single month. Eventually, we reached the point where, that was we still kept doing that, but we had enough managers who were either getting promoted or who were new to the company that we wanted to do something for all new managers to make sure everyone was learning and speaking the same language. And so once a month, everyone who had either been hired or promoted, we did a 2-hour workshop to just get them aligned on the basics. What are the expectations that we have of you? How do we give feedback? Several of the topics that we covered earlier.
That's helpful. And then I'll ask one other question. And again, this might make some folks uncomfortable, whether this is warranted or not. I think there's often organizations who don't naturally think about their HR team as providing leadership training. Sometimes there's a credibility to be built there. That might be from past culture. That might be from past leadership. That might just be handed down unfairly. What's your thought on helping HR develop credibility within the org?
Yeah, so while HR needs to own this training, I don't think HR needs to be the one to deliver the training. I'm getting a few comments in the chat that maybe sound isn't working. But I'll keep going if you guys can let me know.
I can hear you. I'll check on my end.
Oh, it's working. Okay, someone said it is working. Okay, cool. Thank you. So HR is responsible for it. It doesn't need to be the one that delivers it. And so I think if there's I'm a one-person team, or I don't feel kind of comfortable doing this, maybe I don't have the credibility I want, I would strongly recommend go out and find the most respected leaders at the company and say, like, what topic would you feel comfortable training on? Because that, I think, can be really, really effective. And I remember doing this when I was at DoorDash. We were really focused on recruiting. So I went to our head of recruiting, Nolan Church. I was like, hey, Nolan, can you give a 1-hour workshop on recruiting? And it was fantastic. Then we had another leader who was very, very good at holding people accountable. And so we had that person come in and, and answer questions. And so I think that can be one thing to do, is like, you don't have to do this, all yourself.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And then one from the audience here, just to finish up. I think the idea about mandating trading is interesting. Mandate all managers to come to that. And I might have just cut out, but was it a company-wide mandate for managers at a certain level, and how many folks did that end up being?
Yeah, it was required, and it was expected that people would come. And so at 250 employees, I think we probably had, like I said, 40-ish managers. I want to say we got 80-90% of people there. What is really important is to get senior leaders who were there in attendance. So like the CEO of DoorDash attended the first manager workshop that we did, and he replied to the company reply all in the email and was like, "I'm really excited for this, looking forward to learning more." And I think that set the culture of like, no one is above this. Like, we're all trying to grow and learn together. Anyway, that became helpful. The required word is really tricky. And so like, we didn't keep attendance, people didn't get in trouble if they didn't come. It was just setting the expectation of like, yeah, this is expected of everybody.
Yeah, I really like your call out there. It's not necessarily that HR has to get up on stage and train every time, but it is their responsibility to bring together the best experts. And that might be within HR, that might be outside. So utilizing the experts across the team, subject matter experts, I think is a great call out.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you do work with someone externally, which awesome, I think it's a very practical and valuable way to go. Make sure that they understand your culture, your needs, and can deliver it in a way that is going to be valuable. So it's not just like, I went and attended this theoretical manager training, and now I'm coming back, and there's such a big disconnect from what I just learned and what I'm living on a day-to-day basis that it wasn't valuable at all. So, okay, let's jump to the next topic, which was how to become a strong people leader that will drive higher employee retention and engagement. So for this one, I really have 5 different principles that I like to follow to drive greater engagement. And the first one is around setting clear expectations. One of my favorite quotes, it comes from George Bernard Shaw, is the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And I found that to be very true, that there is often a disconnect between what the leader thinks the person should do and what they actually think they should do. And so in setting clear expectations, this is, what does it take to do their job? How are they going to be measured? How are they going to be rewarded? Expectations around, future growth in their career. All of these things are really important. And then the best way I found to do that is, once expectations have been shared, asking your team member to repeat back what they understand they are to do, and even put it in writing. So anyway, that's one of my favorite things. The second is caring personally. If the leader if the direct report feels that the leader genuinely cares about them, they will be far more engaged as an employee. And this can be, this is kind of simple things of, how was their weekend? How are your kids or significant other, or whatever interesting things are going on to them? What do they care about? Check in on that. A third is challenge directly. And if you've seen these two next to each other, you may be thinking, okay, that's the radical candor framework, which we may get to a little bit down the road. But that's really, really important, because I found that like a lot of managers are afraid of pushing their team too hard. They don't want to look like a jerk, but I have learned that top talent wants aggressive goals. They want to do hard things, but even the most self-driven employees benefit from having a leader who sets high standards and demands excellence. And so I think that's if you look back on like the most rewarding moments in your career, it probably wasn't the company party or some cool perk. It was like something really hard that you did that you were proud of. And so as leaders, we can help there.
Nathan, real quick,
yeah,
on this one, this is such a huge one. It's uncomfortable at times to be direct, be clear. It's for many folks. What have you seen? Is that just a muscle that the more you do it, the more comfortable you get? Are there certain things you've done personally to get better at that, in demanding excellence, in setting those expectations, and in holding people accountable when they don't meet those expectations? Because that's not a natural muscle for everybody.
Yeah. So it actually gets to this next one of giving regular feedback, especially to high performers. I think managers naturally sit on a pendulum that range from kind of micromanager to absentee managers. And like, no one wants to be a micromanager. We hear all the time of like, oh, I had this micromanager. Like that, I think is the worst word one can be called. But often, especially when it comes to high performers, the bigger concern may be being an absentee manager of like, okay, this person's good. They've got it all together. And so it's carving out time to make sure that you're focusing on your high performers as much or probably even more than the lower performers. And yeah, to your point, like I do think that is a muscle. I've heard this quote, leadership is an unnatural act. A lot of what we're doing as leaders is very uncomfortable. And so like challenging people, holding them to a high bar, giving them difficult feedback when they fall short, or if they did something good, pushing them even harder to do it better. Like that does take reps. And there's tools that we can talk about. And I talk about them in my book as well. But like, yeah, I think it just comes from reps and getting those in. And then this fifth one, and I think this really gets to the recognition piece. Surprise and delight. And this concept came from DoorDash. It was one of the values we had early on as a company, and it was specifically for customers of like, what can we do for customers to surprise and delight them, to do something they're not expecting, to go above and beyond. And I think from a recognition standpoint, that's something that great leaders do of like, is this a spot bonus? Is this a personal gift you gave them? Is this like a really well thought out email or handwritten note? It can be a variety of things, but like looking to surprise and delight the team, I think can go a really, really long way as well in driving retention and engagement. So anyway, those are a couple of thoughts that I had on those.
That's awesome. We're getting a lot of folks in the chat who had some interesting ideas, at least on the hard feedback. There's the old sandwich approach, praise, give difficult feedback, and then make sure we reiterate what people are doing well. But the surprise and delight is also landing well with the audience, and some good anecdotes coming from that. So
awesome. Okay, and let me actually just jump in to. I'm going to skip ahead to the next one because I think they're pretty tied together. Like, how do we give effective feedback, and when necessary, how do we help people to find a new role if they're not in the right spot? I'll share this very quickly. This is the Radical Candor framework. It's been really, really valuable for me to think about. I have found that many leaders fall into the kind of bottom right quadrant or the top left, where we either care too personally or think we care too personally that we're unwilling to challenge them directly, and that's ruinous empathy. Or the other one of like, nope, I'm challenging you directly. I'm coming right at you, but maybe I haven't invested enough for you to know that I care personally about you. And so optimizing for that top right quadrant, I think, is really valuable. For me personally, as an early manager, I was in the top left. It was very difficult for me to challenge people directly. And then I think I saw like, okay, well, if I really cared about them, I would give them that feedback. Like that's what caring personally about someone is, that like you're not worried about yourself or how you're going to be viewed. Like you are more focused on helping them get better. So anyway, I got a couple more thoughts. Anything there? Should I keep rolling, Dave?
I did have one thought. One thing I've noticed, and I'd be interested to see if you had any experience with this. Often, the companies we work at, the culture is largely defined by the feedback culture. I've worked at companies where it was often, it was present, it was just very direct, and that was just such a big part of the company culture. And then I've also worked at companies where people had hard times having difficult conversations, and often culture are the things. It's the things you allow to happen without saying anything about them. So I've been on both sides of those. Is that consistent with your experience? Does the feedback culture inform quite a bit the overall culture of the company?
Yeah, I think so. LinkedIn was a less direct culture. DoorDash was a very direct culture. And I remember like within a couple of months of being there, I got more feedback around my performance than I ever wanted to get. And likewise quickly learned that like, okay, in order to survive in this environment, I also need to do the same. And I had one experience one day, I think I made 3 direct reports cry, or in giving feedback, there were 3 direct reports in tears. And I felt bad because I didn't want to make them, feel bad about themselves, but there was a directness in the feedback that needed to be given. And so I do think that culture is important, but like I'm of the opinion like how direct a feedback you're going to deliver may vary based on the culture, but a culture where there is little feedback or there are many things that are being left unsaid, that can be a very, very poor culture. Like I have found in those environments, like they're generally not high performance cultures. And so like I just don't know how you get better without direct feedback.
If I can real quick click on that one, just real quick, if you were to come into an organization where that is the case, where there's just not a culture of direct, hard conversations, and you're running people ops, you're running HR, where would you start? You're not going to turn it over in a matter of days or weeks, but where would you personally start to help establish some healthy feedback and hard conversation culture?
Yeah. I mean, if I am the HR leader, then I am starting with the leadership team. And if you report to the CEO, the COO, whoever it may be, that I think is a good conversation to have with them of, here are my observations. Am I getting this right? And just kind of checking yourself there. And if you don't, if you're in a role further down in the organization, having that conversation with your manager. I mean, the reality is like changing a company culture when there's reluctance is really, really difficult to do. And so I think like what's in your sphere of control, what's in your sphere of influence, start there. And is there willingness to change? Sometimes there isn't. Sometimes you're banging your head against the wall, and that's not healthy.
Good call.
Okay, we got a question. How can you balance direct feedback with empathy, or how can you develop this muscle of radical candor? I'm only going to touch on this for a second. This is one of my favorite frameworks for using when you have difficult feedback to give. Something has taken place and now you need to approach someone. This is a very powerful framework. You describe the situation, you then describe the observable behavior, and then the impact. And the magic in this one is separating the behavior from the impact. The behavior is 100% objective. If a camera or microphone were in the room, it would pick that up. And the impact is what you thought about it, how that impacted you. And I found this to be really valuable because you're not saying like, hey, Dave, you're such a jerk when you did this or this or this. And it's more of like, okay, like I noticed this. And I say that because it made me feel this, or it gave me the impression of that. And so I think this is a powerful framework that you can, if you haven't leveraged this before, just Google SBI framework. You'll find a lot of good examples on that. And then just to wrap this topic up, 7 rules for giving effective feedback. Number 1, whether it's positive or negative, be specific. The more specific you can be, the better. This is where SBI is good. Like you're pointing out the objective behavior you've seen. Delivering as soon as possible. We've probably had that experience. We get the performance review and we find out that we did something 6 months ago or 9 months ago that we're finally hearing about now. There's nothing more frustrating than that. And so as much as possible, kind of tying the feedback with the behavior that took place. Asking for permission is another one of just like, hey, do you have a second where I can give you some feedback? Because you don't want to just catch them at an awful time. If they say, no, I never want to hear this feedback, of course you can say, no, like we need to have this conversation, but a simple asking for permission kind of opens them up and makes them more open to it. Public with praise, private with criticism. Being aspirational is another one that I've really liked, of like, okay, you have told me you want to be the VP of finance or chief people officer. Based on my experience, like, here's what you may need to work on in order to get there. Kind of tying, their goal with what they need to do. And then finally, like, emphasizing that you value them in their growth. And this is the one where, like, I would just call that out. Like, I am giving you this feedback because I care about you and I want to see you grow. So these are rules for giving feedback that I found to be effective.
One thought I had here, I think of a team, like, a coaching team. Often there's a player who responds well to the yelling and the intensity. Sometimes there's another player who responds differently. As you are coaching executives and in your experience, how do you balance the being personalized in feedback without coming off as so different across the org that people are unsure of your leadership identity? Do you get what I'm saying here? How do you be personal with folks in their style? Like, are you asking them what type of feedback do you like to receive, and how are you customizing that feedback while still maintaining your leadership, a consistent leadership identity?
Yeah, I think if it's a direct report or if it's someone you're working very closely with, having that conversation can be really effective. One of the tools I do talk about in the book is creating a personal operating manual. And one of the things that I encourage clients to do and anyone to do is like, let's call that out. Like, how do you receive feedback well? Or what's your style of giving feedback? And then making it an open conversation. I think it may be challenging to, for every person in the organization you work with to understand and know exactly when or how they want to receive feedback. But for the people you're working most closely with, like, having that direct conversation, I think is really good. Like, for an example for me personally, I used to get asked by direct reports immediately after a presentation, what feedback do you have for me? Or what could I do to improve? And I have found that I need time to digest and kind of sit with it for a little bit. So, like, on the spot, I'm probably not going to come up with anything real good. But if you give me a couple of minutes, or if we circle back the next day, I'll be able to give you some fairly thoughtful feedback. Okay. So then here's the next question. What if they can't turn things around? I am actually going to share a story that I think drives this principle home. And it's a baseball story. So I don't know if you're a Yankees fan or a Red Sox fan, but this story goes back to 2003. Boston Red Sox New York Yankees. It's Game 7 of the American League Championship Series. Winner of this game is going on to the World Series. Pedro Martinez is on the mound. He's holding a 5-2 lead. Right now, Pedro is the best pitcher in baseball. He's a future Hall of Famer. He's pitched brilliantly, but at this point, it's late in the game. He's starting to waver a little bit. But he steps back out there. It's the 8th inning. He gets the first out, but then things go sideways. The Yankees get a hit, then they get another hit, and you clearly see that Martinez's arm is getting tired. Like, he's thrown 120 pitches at this point. A lot of pitchers don't make it past 100. And so the Red Sox manager recognizes the situation, walks out there, and has a conversation. And he knows there's plenty of well-rested pitchers who are there. But Martinez tells him, I got this. I'm fine. Yeah, I might have just misplaced the pitch there. A guy had a good swing. Like, it's going to work out. Anyway, the manager leaves Pedro in the game. And unfortunately, the manager now watches in disbelief as the Yankees continue to collect hits. They tied the game, and then they go on and win the game in extra innings. And I have found, like, this experience that happened with Pedro Martinez and his manager, happens too often in the leadership world. Of, like, we leave our pitcher in the game too long. There are times where strong performers are going to have experiences where just, like, they're not the right fit anymore. Was Martinez a bad person or a bad pitcher because he should have gotten pulled or because he made mistakes? No, he shouldn't have been in the game anymore. And there's this quote. I first heard this story from Jeff Weiner, who used to be the CEO of LinkedIn. And he said, leaving a member of your team in a key role when it's no longer the right fit is one of the most common and costly mistakes the manager can make. But the good news is that with practice and experience, it's also one of the most avoidable. So I have been involved in many, many terminations throughout my career, and almost never has the leader said, oh, you know what, like, we let go of that person too soon. Almost always it's, oh, you know what, like, when you get to that point where it's time to let them go, we should have done this 6 months ago. Or, you know what, I knew kind of a year ago that we should have made this happen. So, like, that's okay. It's okay if people are no longer the right fit. It could be the role they're in. It could be the speed at which the company's growing. Maybe they can move to a different role, internally. Maybe they need to exit the company entirely. But, like, as a manager, it is your role. It is our role to make those difficult decisions. So anyway, I'll pause there for a second before we jump to the next topic.
I'd love to ask there. This is a difficult one. Termination conversations are extremely difficult. I've also been there. How do you, like, there's always, again, this might go hiding behind hard conversations and not wanting to have them. Often it's like, maybe we move them to a new role across the company. How do you identify when that's actually a good strategy versus when it's just not working out anymore? And do you have, I don't know, have you seen that successfully work out where it is just a role issue, a manager issue, transition them to another team? Any patterns or thoughts you might have for the audience here on that type of conversation?
Yeah, two thoughts. One is, when an employee gets terminated, almost always they are surprised and they feel like, oh, I didn't hear this feedback. I think some of it is sometimes that's true. Or actually, sometimes that may be like, just kind of a disillusioned employee, or they want to believe that. But I think a lot of times, like, that is actually true. Like, we haven't been direct enough in giving them feedback. And so, a lot of you HR folks now are like, okay, I know this, I got it. But, like, have the conversation and let's document that feedback. You can do there's lots of thoughts on PIPs. I won't get into PIPs on this one unless people really want to go there. But, like, documented feedback is so important. Like, this needs to be written, because when it is written, there is no doubt at all around this feedback. But when it comes time to having the conversation. Oh, sorry, my mind went blank for a second. Can you throw out the question again that you had, Dave?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Any patterns like versus hey, it's time to go versus we think you can be successful elsewhere in the company. What do you see there?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's it. Moving folks internally. Yeah. Thank you for the nudge. I have found it work at times. I have found most of the time, though, when a leader is saying, "Hey, it's not working here. We'd love to move this person to another role or another department." It is almost always that leader avoiding having to make a difficult decision. And so I think it's our role to really push hard on that of like, okay, tell me how this person is going to be successful in the new role. Are they set up for success? Do they have the attributes that are going to help them? I would say 90% of the time, like they're passing their problem off to someone else because they really care about this person or they don't want to make the difficult decision themselves. And so that isn't always the case. I've seen it work out where people do move to a new role. One other pattern I've seen is the higher up you are at an organization, the less likely moving to a new role is going to work. Because usually at that point, it's, there may be cultural challenges or they may not be able to kind of lead effectively across an organization. Earlier in career, I found it to be much more successful because then it's usually like, maybe they don't have the right skills. Maybe they're a good culture fit, but they just don't have the skills to be successful here. Let's move them to a role where they do have that.
I like that. It's you hit the nail on the head. Often the let's move them is masking the accountability of the manager wanting to have a hard conversation. And I think we need to get away from that. It's almost like if there is a case to be made, it's almost like ask that manager to make a case for this person and a clear case for this person that they are a fit and can thrive in another team. And if that case can't be made, maybe that's the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. If it's all right with you, Dave, I know we're almost like 45 minutes in. I'm going to punt on this final topic. And I'm happy to, if people want to reach out to me directly, I'm happy to share my thoughts in here. I have a full chapter in the book dedicated. We were going to touch on like why leaders should stop giving advice and start asking questions. I think it's a really important topic on developing coaching skills. But I want to make sure we have time for questions and that we cover that. So I'm actually going to wrap with this quote here. And this is one of my favorite quotes. I stumbled on it a couple of years ago. I think about it all the time. It comes from Kwame Anthony Appiah. And he says, in life, the challenge is not so much to figure out how best to play the game. The challenge is to figure out what game you're playing. And I have found as a leader that the biggest mistakes, the biggest setbacks, the biggest frustrations I've had come from when I have tried to play someone else's game. When I have pursued a job or taken a role that I thought was cool or prestigious or whatever it may be, that ultimately wasn't the right fit. And I have found there is no single blueprint for what a great leader looks like. There really isn't. Like, you have a unique set of strengths. You've been given a set of gifts that nobody else has. And your success, our success, comes when you learn how to leverage those gifts. And that's where I think the real power unlocks. So yeah, I'll go ahead and wrap there with that quote.
Thank you.
And we can open it up for Q&A.
Thank you. Definitely appreciate your time, Nathan. And if there is any last minute Q&A that the folks want to submit, we've answered a lot of them. We're very grateful for your time. Obviously, to figure out more about Nathan's book, we encourage you to go look it up. We will be emailing 3 random winners who will get a free Audible download as part of your participation in this. We're very grateful for you here. And Nathan, thanks for the time. Congratulations on a second book launch. I know a lot of us have actually, we got a pre-read into it, and definitely encourage the audience to get in there, look up Nathan on LinkedIn, follow the things he's doing there. And thanks again, everybody. This was great. We'll look forward to another episode with everybody down the line.
Thank you so much. Yeah, reach out. I'd love to connect, and we'll see you then.
Okay. Thanks so much, Nathan.
Okay. Thank you.
See you, everybody. Bye.